I'm still a photographer. I opened my sermon reflecting on our exhibition for PhotoFest with this quote from the diary of the Czech photographer Lubuše Jarco-Jakava. It is reflective of her insistence to define herself. She grew up under an oppressive political regime and refused to let it define her. We'll return to Lubuše and her photographs shortly, but before we do, I'd like to pause to remind you that the theme for worship this month is seeds. Last week, I spoke with you about how the seeds of English Unitarianism lay in their descent from the creeds of the established church. The early English Unitarians were people who refused to follow the official doctrine of the Church of England. Instead, they helped to create a tradition that objects to theocracy, government in the name of divine priests or through laws supposed to be divinely inspired, and calls for the separation of church and state. We live at a time when the state of Texas has incorporated religious doctrine about the nature of abortion into its laws. We live in a place where the dominant political party has placed anti-LGBTQ positions drawn from evangelical Christian theology into its platform, and it has passed legislation targeting families with transgender children. At such a time, it's important to recall that Unitarian Universalism's seeds are in descent. Last week, we considered the institutional nature of those seeds. This week, I would like us to contemplate them on a more spiritual level. The word spirit, I've said before, comes from the Latin spiritus, breath. To speak of spirit is, in some sense, to speak of the breath of life, the sweet inhale, the soft exhale that continues us from one moment to the next. The word spiritual in this manner can be thought of those things relating to the breath of life. So when we speak of a spiritual practice, we are essentially talking about a method of breathing. Such a practice is something that we have whether we are conscious of it or not. We can be intentional about our breathing, pay attention to it while we meditate or do yoga or pray, or we can merely let it happen. But as long as we are alive, we are all spiritual, which is to say, breathing beings. The hymn we sang right before our sermon this morning by the Czech Unitarian minister Norbert Kapuk speaks, or better, invites us to sing this dynamic. Song is a spiritual practice. It's breathing together. When we sing, we bring breath into the body. We use our vocal cords to shape sounds. We exhale. We do all this, at least we hope we do all this, in unison, keeping time as a group making music together. Kapuk's hymn revolves around the mystery of spirit. Mother Spirit, Father Spirit, where are you? Where does the breath of life come from? Where is it going? Kapuk finds it in nature, in the sky song, in the forest. He discovers it among his human fellows, writing of our breath, and he discovers it in our art. Nature, human fellowship, art. In the Unitarian Universalist tradition, we know that each of these can help us grow into what the 19th century Unitarian theologian William Ellery Channing called the likeness of God. Alternatively, we might understand our relationships with nature, each other, and art as a way to come to know our authentic selves. Who am I, we sang, just as Lubuše asks in her diary. It's a query we each seek to answer over the course of our lives. You are a different person than I am. Your answers will be other than mine. And yet, it is a question that we each have to answer. One mark of a free society is how free each of us is to answer the question, who am I? We call Unitarian Universalism a free religious faith because rather than prescribe a religious answer to the question, we come together to explore it and try to find the answer that is truest to each of us. Channing encouraged us to cultivate our authentic selves through something he named self-culture. This was, in his words, the labor of the unfolding and perfecting of our nature and the ongoing work of self-improvement. On a personal level, the seeds of our faith lie in this effort. While the seeds of institutional Unitarianism can be discovered in our rejection of theocracy, the seeds of what it means for us to be a religious community are located within the acknowledgement that we each have a unique human and uniquely human experience. There will never be another you. There will never be another I. And we reject religious creeds because we understand that whatever it truly means to be me or to be you cannot be put into a doctrine developed by someone else. I'm still a photographer. If you're here with us in person this morning, I suspect that you've noticed that our sanctuary looks a little bit different than it normally does. We have an art show along the wall titled Lubusze Yarchakovica, The Photographer as Dissident. It continues, by the way, in the fireside room. The show, co-curated by my father and myself, is being held in conjunction with PhotoFest, Houston's biennial photography festival. It's one of the largest and most influential such photography festivals in the world. Every 2 years, it brings thousands of artists, curators, and collectors to the city. We were invited to participate in it shortly after I arrived here in Houston in 2018 by Stephen Evans, PhotoFest's executive director. In 2020, we attempted to hold a show sponsored in part by Michigan State University, featuring the work of Leonard Freed. How many of you remember that show? Well, you'll know that then when I say attempted, we attempted it because we installed it, opened the exhibition, and then had to cut it short as far as so many things were cut short with the advent of the pandemic. Nonetheless, in the week or so it was open, we had some 400 people through our campus to see it. And it's my hope that this year's exhibition will bring in a similar amount of interest, if not more so. We're on track to meet that expectation because the exhibition has been selected by PhotoFest to be on their bus tour, which means that later this week, some 100 of the world's most influential photographers and critics will be in our sanctuary to tour our building and look at the show. With a bit of luck, we might get some good press. I think it's important for us to participate in things like PhotoFest. I've spent a considerable amount of time studying what makes a Center City urban Unitarian Universalist congregation strong. And for a community like FIRSTUU, we have to have more than just a social justice program or religious education or religious practice to sustain ourselves over time. We have to be a site to nurture arts and culture. Run through the list of the most enduring Unitarian Universalist congregations, and this will quickly become apparent. Channing's Arlington Street Church in Boston nurtured the Transcendentalist literary movement. All Souls in Washington, D.C. has long been a site for notable jazz concerts and is the home of one of the principals of the African-American ensemble Sweet Honey in the Rock. The architect Frank Lloyd Wright was inspired by his uncle's urban Chicago Unitarianism, and All Souls Tulsa has recently hosted Salman Rushdie, and so the list goes. I suspect that this is because we Unitarian Universalists understand that art offers a path to uncover the authentic self, find the spark of the divine within, and attempt to answer Capek and Lubuche's question, who am I? Perhaps you've had an experience of either creating or engaging with art that has brought you closer to knowing who you are. I've certainly found the art of preaching a gateway to getting to know myself better. Each week when I come before you to offer you a word, I find myself in the process of unfolding that Channing so eloquently describes as the root cause of our gathering. It's not easy. I want to give you something of myself that will stir you, inspire you, and help you to uncover a portion of who you truly are through a celebration of our shared humanity and shared tradition. Deep, the hope calls to deep. And I know that the art of preaching I offer does not always resonate with everyone. It cannot, for my authentic self is different than yours. And the words that come from my spirit will not always speak to yours. The same is true with all art. The visual art of an artist will inspire some and not others. I've spoken with people who have seen the Mona Lisa and described Da Vinci's masterpiece as one of the most exquisite things they've ever witnessed. The mystery of the smile, the mischievous sparkle of the eyes, the well-painted hands, and takes them and it leaves them in awe of art's power. And I've discussed people who have seen the painting with people who have seen it and experienced nothing at all. I'm still a photographer. We return now to that line from Le Bouscher's diary. She is a photographer who has long pushed the question of the nature of art. She grew up in communist Czechoslovakia, born the year before Stalin died in Prague to two parents who were artists. She was long limited in her ability to pursue her craft. Rather than being allowed to attend college, when she was a young adult, she was forced to undergo what used to be called proletarization, which is a fancy word for the process that the Communist Party used to try to take people who had been born into the middle class and make them become members of the working class. Rather than creating a society where all people could enjoy the good things in life, the Stalinists denied individuals with cultural backgrounds that they disapproved of the opportunities they afforded to the rest of the members of the society. A true socialist society is a true free society. It's a society where everyone is provided with the resources they need to define themselves. But under the communist regime in Czechoslovakia, Le Boucher was not allowed to define herself. She was long denied the opportunity to pursue college or to study art or to try to work as a photographer because her parents had been branded enemies of the state. And when she finally did get that chance, she was told she could only make a certain kind of art. It had to portray how good life was under the regime. Have you ever been similarly constricted, where someone or some government has tried to tell you who you can or cannot be? It is a disheartening, crushing experience. The Czech writer, dissident, and ultimately politician Václav Havel wrote about the necessity for the human spirit of living within the truth, of uncovering and celebrating the authentic self within each of us. He objected to communism because it prevented people from living what is true to them. Rather than acknowledging that many working people were miserable under the rulership of the Communist Party, artists and intellectuals were told to constantly uplift the regime's successes. In such a situation, the artist's act of portraying life as it is becomes an act of dissent. Rather than taking photographs of workers joyously toiling in factories, Le Boucher resisted the regime's narrative and made pictures of them goofing off on the job, taking unauthorized breaks, even finding spots to sleep when they were supposed to be toiling. Her art became a way for her to define herself rather than let the regime define her. Dissidents are typically thought of as people who are openly in resistance to or publicly speaking out against a regime. In Texas, I'm a dissident because I speak out in opposition to the state's theocratic regulation of abortion and dangerous gun laws. The same statement is probably true for many of you. But Le Boucher was a different kind of dissident. While she was often watched by the secret police and sometimes harassed by them and targeted by the regime, she did not generally speak out. Instead, she used her photography alongside her diary to cultivate a sense of self in opposition to society's structure. She sought to record her life as it was. She did not idealize things. Now, for some of us, this may make uncomfortable art. Life is a far more messy affair than we often like to admit it is. We humans like to fit things into neat orders and patterns. Many of us want to cram the mystical experience of being spiritual into the confines of creeds, which are meant to delineate what it means to be human and what it means to have a relationship with the divine. But life is not like this. Unitarian Universalist theologian Forrest Church has described religion as our human response to the knowledge that we are alive and will have to die. Each of our responses to that reality is different. For Le Boucher, recording her authentic life meant photographing and writing realities that other artists might implicitly or explicitly deny. 32 years old, divorced and not emotionally attached, unkempt, disheveled. Through her art, she engaged with her sexuality, the violence of a failed and abusive marriage, an abortion she had, heavy drug use and alcohol use, the final illness and death of her mother, and other subjects which can be upsetting and painful to face. Yet in Havel's words, this did not prevent her from attempting to live within the truth. Now, I'll be honest that some of the art that she created through her pursuit of living within the truth is not really fit for our sanctuary. As open-minded as Unitarian Universalists like to be, there are topics or images about human life that many of us squirm at if we face honestly. But there are plenty of other authentic images that we can show. And so here in our sanctuary and fireside room, we have selected photographs of the Tea Club, one of Prague's only LGBTQ clubs under the communist regime. They show life to be what it is, messy and complicated. Look at the images and see joy, love, exuberance, and also something of difficulty. The images themselves can be disorderly and imperfect. They're filled with accidents. A hand blots out part of what there is to see. A mismatch between shutter and flash leaves a frame half developed. Light blurs. But that is how it goes. Life is filled with accidents and mistakes. To live authentically is to be open to what they bring, rather than to deny that chance exists. The photographs are also a reminder that even under the harshest of regimes, dissent and dissidence are sometimes possible. It was very difficult to live and love openly as a member of the LGBTQ community in Prague in the 1980s. While sex between people of the same gender was technically legal, it was also quite legal to discriminate against community members or even harass them and, in some cases, beat them. Yet Le Boucher's work depicts far more joy than fear, much more love than hate. It is a reminder that whatever reactionary members of her society or ours might teach, the LGBTQ community has always been around, and its members have always found places to love and celebrate each other. In Texas, it feels like an important act at this time for us as a religious community to place such a testimony upon our walls. It's a reminder that no matter what the dominant political party might say, there are many ways to live and love authentically as a human being. And it is a reminder that art offers us one path, one gateway to the spiritual. Le Boucher's art is a reflection of her authentic self, with all her struggles and difficulties. What is yours? How would you uncover your authentic self, your spark within, and let it unfold as best you can? The beauty of our community is that we need not seek the answers to such questions alone. We answer them together. For the seeds of our tradition might be found in our individual spiritual experiences, but flourishing is something we celebrate in community, through art, through word, through music and song. So that it might be so, I invite the congregation to say, Amen.